Good day, class. My name is Dr. Patrick Chase. Welcome to Org 4451, Organizational Behavior. Hopefully, you've had a chance to review the syllabus and take a look at everything that's required for this class for this week and the follow-on weeks. All right. So today, we're just going to do an overview, basically, of org behavior, what org behavior is, and what the things that we'll be learning about in this particular session. All right. So for those of you who don't necessarily know what org behavior is, really we're trying to figure out how do people behave in the workplace, right? And what's the relationship between personnel and the management, right? And so we need to study that. We need to figure out what is the dynamics of how people feel when they come to work. How does that contribute to efficiency and productivity? Does the leadership have any impact on that? And when we know they do, but we need to get down into more detailed level into figuring out, okay, how do we look at these things and analyze them, and then take them and then put them in such a manner that it's beneficial or it's helpful in making the workplace a better place. Okay. And we're trying to figure also on the organizational culture, right? What's the organization like itself? What do people think about the organization as a whole, right? In general, without knowing people themselves, but knowing the workers themselves, right? So in many cases, if you ask someone about a particular company, they all have an opinion, right? Oh, Apple, people that work there don't like it, or Google, they don't like it. It's high pressure. Or if you work for a big brokerage firm, very cutthroat, like J.P. Morgan, Wells Fargo, Goldman Sachs, very cutthroat. So that kind of thing. So that indicates to me, what kind of organization we have, what the culture could possibly be like if I was an employee or candidate going to work there. I'd want to know, but I'd also want to know from a leadership perspective, because maybe I want to change that persona. Maybe I want to change that perspective of what people think about, excuse me, about our company. All right. All right. So let's look at this diagram real quick. The nature of organizational behavior, right? And so if we look at it, you see how that when we talk about the environment, right, could be external, internal environment, but they all contribute, right, to the behavior in the organization, and then it affects the organization itself, right? And so you may have external dynamics that are pushing on the organization to make it behave in a certain way, as a federal guidelines, regulations, just the socioeconomic, situation at the time, right? And then you have the environment. How does it affect the humans, right? And then how does it affect the personnel? And then when they bring that to work, how does that affect the organization itself, right? And so you look at here, you got the individual organization interface. This is kind of where they meet in the middle. The environment's impact on the employee, the environment's impact on the organization. And then here we kind of meet in the middle, right? Where we have to be in a common space at a common time. And we're trying to get we have a common goal, and we're trying to get there. And so you have to take the environment into consideration. And the environment could be many things. It's not just, external environment, talking about like people's personal lives, what's going on with them professionally, what's going on, in our society. All those play a role into the environment, and that in turn impacts the human behavior, which also impacts the organization. And then we see how we deal with that, right? When we have to interact with each other, and when we get to the point where maybe we don't necessarily see eye to eye on things, right? Based on some of the things, some of the factors that are in the environment that are influencing how we think and our mindset and our approach to things, okay? Lots of reason to study organizational behavior, right? Just to be better, okay? Not just a better employee, but and a better manager, but just be a better person, right? And to understand that you have an impact on the organization, right? You have an impact on the company. You have an impact on the people that work around you, the people that work for you, the people that work with you, right? So you have an impact. So it behooves you to want to learn on the dynamics of, okay, what goes on inside of a company, and how can I better facilitate long lasting relationships that are going to, impact the overall goal, right? So being a better manager, definitely, if you're in a position of leadership, you always want to learn more about the people that work for you, your boss, and how you can get more synergy and more productivity out of people if just by understanding them, right? By knowing little things or understanding or remembering little things about the people that work for you, people that work with you, it will go a long way. Okay. And understanding, of course, how people behave and why they do what they do. Basic motivation theory. Okay. Why, do we do what we do? All right. Um, Everyone's different. Everyone has their own motivations, right? But we like to know what those are. Either they're intrinsic or extrinsic, right? And what I mean by that is intrinsic is more you're doing it because you feel good about it or it makes you feel a certain way. There's no reward at the end except for maybe self gratification, or it's just more of something that's for you. Extrinsic is a little different. Extrinsic is when I'm motivated by tangible things, right? Bonuses, maybe like a promotion, or maybe even a pat on the back or something like that. That could be kind of extrinsic and intrinsic at the same time, right? So you have to try to really figure out, excuse me, why people do what they do, why they behave, a certain way. You have people at work that are very motivated, go-getters, and then you have other people who are just kind of cruising along, doing the bare minimum, just doing enough to get by. And then you have those that just totally bomb and just are not very good at being an employee. They might be good at what they do, but they're not good employees, right? So there's a lot of people like that. I'm good at what I do, but I'm not necessarily a good worker. I'm not a good employee per se. Okay. All right. So when you have companies that really take their time and apply, organizational behavior principles, excuse me, it's been a long day. Um, that success implement organizational principles, they're motivated, right? The employees are engaged. They're actively looking for things to do to get better, right? They're totally concerned and not consumed with their work, but they're very proud of their work and they take pride in what they do. And so those are the employees you really want to get and value, right? The other thing is you normally have or get strong leadership and direction. If you have strong, OB principles being applied, right, people tend to rise to the top, okay, because they know that the leadership is concerned about them, and that probably is one of the more important aspects of organizational behavior. Understanding and knowing that you as a leader have an impact on the workforce, right? And if the workforce likes you or respects you, they will go above and beyond to do what they have to do, right, in order to meet the objective, right? They'll do their job and they'll do it to the best of their ability. Um, if the workforce doesn't necessarily have, doesn't care, they're indifferent about you, they don't because they don't really know you, whatever the case may be, doesn't mean that they won't work hard, but it's a different type of work hard. Now you're talking about they're working hard because strictly they need the job, they need the money. It's not out of any sense of loyalty or dedication to the job. It's basically survival, and this is the way they make their living. And so there's a difference in that, and a difference in the work. All right, you can see it. There's a difference in the, attitude and the ability to say, you know what, I'll stay late because I need to get this done because I don't want to let the organization down. I don't want to let the people that work next to me down, right? Or I don't want to let my boss down. Advice, well, it's 5:30, time for me to go, and then just leave whether or not the task is done, and they'll come back tomorrow, and it may be due tomorrow, right? Whatever it is you had to do, it may be due tomorrow, and you didn't get it done. You have to keep those things in mind, right? Better bottom lines. And at the end of the day, that's what it's about for 9 out of 10 companies, if not 10 out of 10, right? We're looking for the best bottom line. The bottom line is always the star of the show, right? The bell of the ball, right? We're always looking for the bottom line or to increase the bottom line. Lower costs, increase revenue, increase profit, right? So if I can, get to a point where I understand what makes people tick and those things that make people motivated to work harder, and I give my workforce those things, that will result in a better bottom line. Because if you think about how, one person can affect a group, that growth or that synergy or that motivation grows exponentially, right? It grows exponentially. And so your bottom line will see a favorable increase, right? A favorable impact in that it will, go up. But with that being said, you also have to make sure that you acknowledge the folks that help you get there, okay? All right, management functions, basic, management functions, planning, organizing, leading, controlling. Okay. So there's one missing in there that I like to use, and that's supervising, right? Planning, organizing, leading, supervising. Leading is kind of sort of the same thing, but not really. And also oversight or quality control, right? So you can kind of fit those within the management functions, okay? Resources used by managers, right? Human resource, financial resource, physical resource, and information resources, right? So basically you have your workforce, you have your money, you have the building or the place that you work at, and you have your technology or your data, per se, your processes, right? Your processes which take inputs and then give you an output, be it a report or some kind of model or whatever the case may be, right? But information, is what we're really looking for, right? So we take the human aspect of it, we take the financial aspect of it, we find a physical location, and then we take the data or the information we have as far as, products that are wanted, that are in demand, or things that we see coming down the line, and we put them all together in which to, get to where we need to be. All right, so as mentioned before, the functions of management, planning, of course, trying to, determine organization design, future position, right, and how to get there. Everybody has a plan, right? Every good company has a plan. Every bad company has a plan. We all have plans, right? The point is that there's a guideline or a guide to help us get to where we need to. In case we lose our way, we can always go back to the plan, right? To figure out, okay, how do we get back on track? What are the things that we need to be doing, right? Organizing, of course, getting everything together, kind of categorizing things and putting things that fit in its particular category or that are related to each other together. Okay. Leading, just getting the right, people in there to make sure that, not only are you, doing the planning and organizing, but you have someone that's kind of, or even someone, but a group of folks even that are kind of heading in the direction of where the organization wants to go, right? They're kind of the guiding light. So follow them, okay? Because they're going in the right direction, and that's where we want to be. And the controlling, of course, is making sure people are doing the things that we need to do, right? And if they're not, fixing those things, right? Fixing that behavior, right? So we need to, kind of be able to push people one way or another, evaluate people, give them feedback, correct their, actions if it's not, in the best benefit of the company, all right? And also help with professional development and all those things. So there's a lot of things that are wrapped up into, planning, organizing, leading, and controlling, and that are subsets of all these things, right? That we should be looking at. Critical management skills, right? Or managerial skills, right? Technical, right? Of course, you want somebody that's technically savvy. You should be technically savvy as a manager. You should know, what the job is for all the people that are underneath you for the most part. And I'm not saying you have to know them intimately, but you should have an idea of, okay, what is everybody doing? And I should be able to do it to some certain degree, right? To some certain degree. You have to be able to talk to people, communicate, right? If you can't communicate, you're pretty much going to be doomed, right? Because again, people are going to, work for you, but they're going to work for you because they have to, not because they necessarily want to. And if your communication is poor and you can't get to understand what it is you want to do, then you're going to have a lot of problems, okay? And you're probably going to end up getting rid of a lot of folks based on the fact that you yourself cannot communicate properly. It's confusing, and people are not sure about what it is you want from them, right? What's the output you're expecting? And there's nothing wrong. Matter of fact, you should set expectations and realistic goals for your employees and your workforce because they need direction as to what you're looking for. If you don't give them, what it is you're looking for, they're going to give you what they think you're looking for, and which may not necessarily be the case, right? You also need to be able to think in an abstract level, right? Conceptually, right? Because as a manager, you're not really down in the weeds looking at one thing. You're looking at a broader, foundational type concept, foundational type uh, um, um, platform, right? And so you need to be able to see the big picture, right? And pull back and see, okay, this is the big picture. Now my folks are getting down in the weeds, right? But at the end of the day, this is what we're going for, right? So conceptually, you need to understand what is going on, right? And then diagnostically, you need to be able to diagnose, the things that are going on, right? To understand cause and effect, right? If this is happening, then you know why it's happening. Or if this happens, then you know what's going to happen next, right? So you have to be able to do that also. Oh, my fault. I'm sorry. All right, let's look at some basic manager functions and look at this chart very quickly, right? And we see how, planning, organizing, leading, controlling all lead to effective and efficient attainment of organizational goals, right? But they come across here, what this graph is trying to say is that all these functions here go across the four planes or the four resources, which all lead to this eventual goal right here, okay? So planning goes across all four resources, organizing goes across all four resources, leading, controlling, so forth and so on. And you get the effective and efficient attainment of organizational goal. So just a visual depiction of, what the managerial functions are and as compared to the management principles, right? All right, so let's talk about some HR now, okay? So HR definitely is critical to the organization and critical to organizational behavior because this is where it really starts, right? How do we take HR and make sure that the organization is where we want it to be, okay? Because HR is the gateway to the manpower, okay? To us hiring, firing, retaining, recruiting folks, okay? Granted, the um, the staff and the line managers and the hiring managers, I should say, have input, and the primary input as to who gets hired, right? But HR also has a say, and HR has a few things that it needs to do in order to vet candidates for the company, right? So there's questions that organizational behavior helps managers, HR managers answer which applicants should be hired and which rewards will be more motivating than others, right? And again, how the organization is will determine if someone fits in the organization. So you have to keep in mind that when you go on an interview, it's not really about your credentials, because you made it to the interview, you apparently have the credentials. The interview is so whoever's interviewing you can see what kind of person you are and if you're a match for the organization. It's not saying you're a good or bad person. It's just trying to figure out, is this person a match with the personality and the culture of our organization, right? And this is where HR comes in, right, with the help of OB to answer that question. So the way organizational behavior will come in is via the hiring manager, because the hiring manager is the one that's, of course, has the need or requirement, as we would say, right? There's a requirement in that person's department, and they tell HR, hey, I need somebody to fill this position. Let's get somebody as soon as possible. HR goes, no problem. Give me a job description, right? A position description, right? And then we will post it, and then we'll start to get candidates in, and then you will screen them out, right? As to who you want, who you don't want, that kind of thing. And then we'll set up interviews in which we will look at the personalities and try to assess, even if being a short period of time, trying to assess whether or not this person is going to fit in the organization. All right. And so that's what we're really kind of looking at. Right. Also, we can get an idea of what kind of things are going to motivate folks to want to stay, in the organization, right? What's going to make them want to be like, okay, cool. I like working here. I want to work here. It's going to take this amount of money, or, whatever the case may be, or these perks, or, what we need to figure out what adds value to a compensation package for the person that we want. Okay. Because not everyone is just focused on money, right? It's not always about just, how much money can I make? Maybe it's the flexibility of the job. Maybe it's the job itself, and what we're doing is more important than the money because we enjoy it so much. It's a passion, vice just a job, right? It's a career. And so maybe we're at a point in our lives where we want to spend more time with our families and not necessarily worried about spending time at work or as much time at work. And so it's critical that we figure what that is. All right, so now let's look at the strategic context of OB, right? The competitive advantage, right? Competitive advantage is basically that thing that a company has that makes them stand out against other companies, right? That other companies can't do, or maybe they're in a group of companies that can do certain things, this one thing or one or two things really well, right? If we look at Amazon, Amazon is leading, basically the number one place to go shop, because the way that competitive advantage is the ability to deliver goods and services quickly, right, at an affordable price, at a high quality, right? And so Amazon competitive advantage over everyone else is their distribution channels. Okay. Maybe we talk about Apple and what their competitive advantage is. Their competitive advantage is, uniqueness of the product and networking, right? The products are all connected to each other, right? And so you have one and they all connect. The iPhone connects to the app, to the computer connects to the Apple TV, and so forth and so on, right? They all connect. So networking, or the ability to put everything, in one flow, I guess, is Apple's competitive advantage. But competitive advantage is that thing that gives you that edge that just says over your competition. Okay, so some sorts of competitive advantage, right? Innovation, which is one Apple is pretty much well known for distribution. That's Amazon, right? Speed could be Amazon also, but more than likely Speed could be something like FedEx. Um, you know, next day, if you have Prime, it gets delivered the next day. Convenience, right? Convenience when we talk about 7-Elevens and that kind of thing, right? Those are convenient, right? That's the competitive advantage. The fact that it's right on the corner and I can get a number of things that I need in order to be competitive. So I don't have to, let's say wait, right? So that's that competitive advantage. Walmart, right? Walmart's competitive advantage is low prices for quality goods, or even, goods that are comparable in value, but aren't name brand per se. Oops. All right, so types of business strategy, cost leadership. Of course, you try to be the lowest cost provider, right? Again, Walmart, all right? Differentiation, right? Developing a product service that has unique characteristics valued by by customers, excuse me. That could be Apple, again. They have pretty good differentiation, right? Specialization, focus on a narrow market segment or niche, right? So we're looking at companies that just do one thing, they focus on one thing, and they're very, very good at it, okay? If we're talking about maybe, I would say some automobile companies, but that's not really a good example because a lot of automobile companies, they do more than just cars. They'll do, jets and engines for planes and other things, lawnmowers. They do all kind of stuff. So in terms of specialization, we may be looking at maybe a a clothes manufacturer, right, or a fashion designer, something like that, right? And then growth, company expansion, go organically, go through acquisitions, right? So here we're talking about, companies that really buy up other companies. Facebook might be a good example of that, right? Because Facebook, we doesn't have any true competition to speak of because they are steadily buying smaller platforms that think they're gonna go and try to beat Facebook. They buy them up, or Google for that matter. They buy up all these other search engines that are smaller, so that they can keep expanding, right, their reach, but at the same time eliminating the competition. All right, so here's more of a breakdown of it, okay? So cost leadership emphasizes operational excellence because if you want to have low cost, you better be operating that, very efficiently, okay? That's how you keep costs low. Don't waste, all right? That's really what it boils down to. No waste and maximizing, all your resources. Differentiation really emphasizes on product innovation, right? Having multiple products to provide to, the customer, not multiple products that are unique in nature, okay? You have to have multiple products, the products that, you just can't get anyplace else, and this is it, right? iPhones is a product you can't get anyplace else because if you compare it to an Android, you get an iPhone, the App Store, or the Apple Store. I forgot what it's called, iTunes or the App Store. No, it's the App Store. The App Store has so many things, right? And Apple has taken that and made that one of their major selling points and benefits of buying an iPhone, right? As compared to the Droid, where their App Store is okay, but it doesn't compare to Apple's. Okay, and then specialization, excuse me, emphasizes customer loyalty, right? So customers are coming in and they're looking for unique or customizable, as it says, products, services, right? Think of people that are buying Lamborghinis and Ferraris or getting things custom made, okay? Those folks are, who really drive specialization strategy, right? And so those companies are the ones that, we're really kind of looking at and say, okay, we got it. All right, some short history on OB, okay? As it says, first formal study was in 1890, right? We're talking about scientific management, right? Really kind of comes to the point where, we start talking about Taylorism. And Taylor was the kind of guy that came up with scientific management and started talking about it and realizing that there was a way in which we could maximize productivity, right? We could take, a formula and say, hey, if someone its job is to, take big rocks and make it into little rocks, right? What does that take? Does it take a 4-ounce pick? Does it take a hammer? What does it take, right? And so understanding that is what really scientific management is about. What's the process down to, all the details as to how we can get someone to work really well. Scientific management really, though, is based on, manufacturing. Okay. So there's an orderly system. There's, really just individualized jobs, but people are, part of a bigger piece or bigger, assembly line per se. Okay. And a lot of times in scientific management, when it originally came about, the managers really were the people that really ran the show, right? The workers didn't have really any real say so, and the managers really were the ones that, hey, came up with the plans and thought of everything, and then the workers were just the folks that were the worker bees. They were just hands. They were just kind of like the extension of the idea, but the physical extension. All right. All right. Some guiding principles, right? Replace rule of thumb work methods with methods based on scientifically studying the task using time and motion studies, okay? Which is something that, Toyota does a lot of, right? Looking at, kinesiology and how the body works in space, right? Looking at how we can, maximize movement, right? Those kind of things, right? Scientifically select, train, and develop all workers rather than leaving them to passively train themselves. So this is a big deal, right? You don't, most folks, well, a lot of folks, I'm not gonna say most folks, but a lot of people don't tend to generally want to go back to school or have additional training for anything, okay? And so it really is up to the organization to train people on the things that they want them to be proficient at, right? Of course, the things that you get trained on are 100% totally about the company, right? And so that's just the way it would go, right? But pick out things you want to train at, select the people that, want to get trained, right? Are motivated to get trained and seem eager and seem ready to participate in getting better, right? Managers provide detailed instructions and supervision to workers to ensure they are following the scientifically developed method, right? Again, the leadership steps in to make sure that, the workers are doing what they're supposed to do, but the manager should be the one developing the people, okay? If you have a manager or, you're a manager and you don't have some plan or some, facet of organizational development, then you're not doing a good job as a manager, because your job as a manager is to make your people better, right? The people that work for you should leave better than when they came, right? But if you make them better, that's going to result in better for the company. And that's what we're really looking for. We're looking for better for the company. Divide work nearly equally between workers and managers. Managers should apply scientific management principles to planning the work, and workers should actually perform the task. Like I said before, the managers kind of come up with the plan, and the workers perform the task, right? Yes, divide work equally between workers and managers. Depends on the work, okay? Depends on the work, right? Managers are not necessarily going to be down on the line and doing the work, but the work they do may not necessarily be able to be done by the workers, right? And so you have to kind of look at that and see, okay, what makes sense. It's not always going to be equal. It's going to be as equal as you can make it. Okay, let's leave it at that. All right. Okay. Let's look at some outcomes of the scientific management, right? Okay. Productivity increase. So now that, again, we're still sticking to the history, right? They saw that there was an increase of productivity, right? But the downside is that the work was boring, right? And it was almost humiliating, right? Because again, the thought in scientific management was that managers came up with the plan, the workers just did the work. They had no input as to how the work was going to be done. Maybe they had some ideas on how to make it better. Nobody cared about that, all right? And so because of that, it was pretty much left behind, after World War One, because you got to think about what was going on during World War One, right? During any war for that matter, right? It's all about trying to get the things that we need for combat, right? For war, bullets, trains, bullets, planes, tanks, that kind of thing, right? And so you heavy manufacturing, so you need a very efficient system. You need a very, somewhat flat uh, um, um, type organization to get those things rolling, because you need to get them in and out real quickly because the war demanded it, right? But after World War One, where people kind of had a little downtime and we didn't need to be producing as many goods as we did during the war, the system, scientific management, really didn't seem to work as well, because now the managers, were relied upon to, would make all these decisions. Now, if you had a bad manager or manager who wasn't all that great, right? And maybe you had some workers who were really efficient, knew what they were doing, but because of scientific management, they weren't really allowed to give their input. You have to listen to the folks that are actually doing the work, right? You have to listen to the people that, as I like to say, where the rubber meets the road. Those are the people that know that job intimately, and they know all the ins and outs. Why would you not listen to them in order to improve the process? Because they're doing it every day, and if they come up with something or some way in which they can improve things, why would you not, take advantage of that, right? That's what you want to do as a manager, as a leader. You want to listen to your folks. You want to see what input they have that can help the system, and in turn, help the organization be better, right? All right. So the Hawthorne effect, right? People improve some aspect of behavioral performance simply because they know they are being assessed, right? So the Hawthorne effect is all based on the Hawthorne experiments, which, were aimed at looking at something else, right? We're aimed at looking at light and how light affects work, but then turned out to be something else, more of a, a kind of a sociology type experiment, where they realized that people like to have interactions at work, right? People like to have to talk to each other and have relationships at work, right? But they also realized that, when people know that they're being tested or assessed, as it says, right, the performance is different. Okay, it's different, right? So people will definitely perform better, right, if they know that they're going to be evaluated, right? And so if you think about, in this context, you may or may not be a sports fan, right? But when professional athletes, or anybody for that matter, right, if you're playing in front of nobody, if you're just there by yourself and you're just kind of like shooting around, or you're just, goofing off, or even if you're playing a real game, but there's no one there to watch, it's not the same as having a crowd there, having the fans there, because no one's watching. So if you mess up or if you don't do as well, it's not a big deal, right? Because no one's going to talk about you. No one's going to, criticize your performance. But if someone's watching, or you're being evaluated, such as, hey, I'm being evaluated because, and I know that I have a huge contract year coming up, right? If I do well this year, then it's my contract year, my new renewal contract. And so if I perform well, I get a new contract, I get a bigger contract, I get more pay, whatever the case may be. Same thing in the workplace, right? People may look at, as they say, um, always do the right thing, even when you think no one's looking. All right. Always work, do your best, because you want to perform at the highest level you can, regardless of you being assessed or evaluated or not. And this is where, the role of the leader and the manager comes into effect, because if I'm working and I'm working hard because I, have a certain respect or certain feeling about the leader, or I really like my boss and that kind of thing, I'm going to do my hardest. I'm going to work hard. But the minute my boss leaves, if I don't like him, I'm really kind of slacking off. I'm going to the bathroom, I'm surfing the net, I'm doing everything else, right, that I'm not supposed to be doing, because I don't think I'm being evaluated. I don't think anyone's looking, right? And so you have to be cognizant of that. All right. Um, HR, right? We view the organization as cooperative systems, right? So really, the organization itself, every part, even if a lot of people wouldn't admit to this, all work together, right? You have to work together. Marketing has to work with HR. HR has to work with operations. Operations has to work with, finance. It's all one team, right? But you have to have cooperation and collaboration throughout the system, or it won't work, right? And what you don't want silo effect. You don't want, people doing their own thing and not, necessarily in line with what else is doing, right? Again, companies that do well have very cooperative systems, okay? And that all starts really in operations. Operations is where everybody takes their cues from, right? And you have to have good leadership in operations, in logistics, but in general, at the higher levels in the C-suite, you have to have good leadership, right? But to, it's all a cooperative effort. Okay, we all have to work together to make this work, and no one department is more important than the other. Okay, unless you're talking about sales, of course, because sales always thinks they're more important than everyone else, but we all know that's not the case. Okay, everybody's just as important. Every department just as important as the other one. HR too. All right. Um, Treating workers' orientations, values, and feelings is important. Okay, because they are. All right. So that's one aspect of or behavior you have to really take consideration now, whereas before you didn't have to, right? And so now it's very much about the experience that people have at work or in life, right? It's not anymore. Not that it's not about the product. People still care about a good product, but they are more concerned about how they get treated, right? And how and if they are valued, right? Is my input important here? Does it have merit? Does it hold any weight here? If I say something and nobody cares ever, right? Then maybe it's not the place for me, right? But a lot of times you want to make sure that you let people know that hey, you're valued here. How you feel and what you think and what you find important is important to us. So please let us know, right? We want to make this thing right with you. All right. Create a new era of more humane employee-centered management. Again, it goes back to, hey, what are you thinking? What can we do to make this a better place for you to come to work, right? We want you to be happy to come to work, right? We don't want you, you know, having anxiety or being sad about coming to work, which is, unfortunately is a very large population in the workforce. A lot of folks just don't like going to work, right? And it's not because they hate the job. A lot of times they just hate the people, that they work with, or they don't like their boss, or they don't like the culture of the organization. They love what they do, right? But they just can't stand the people. And if you have a situation where you have a great job and great people, you will see your company grow. Okay. If you have a situation where you have a bad leadership but a great job, you'll see okay some level of success, but it'll be somewhat there'll be room for improvement, right? There'll be room for for more productivity, more efficiency, right? But people are there because they need to be there, not because out of any sense of loyalty or any sense of dedication to the leadership or the company, right? And so when we think about, how this kind of fits, if you think about the Japanese culture as compared to the American culture, right? The Japanese culture is very much dedicated to the organization, right? The workers dedicated to the organization, dedicated to the work, right? And they love, the fact that they work for a particular company and they're prideful of it, right? They are very, proud of that point or that fact. Whereas the States could go either way. You can have, a situation where people aren't necessarily too keen on the organization. They come to work, do what they have to do, and they leave. Now, whether or not they do a good job is a different story, all right? Most times they do a decent job. Sometimes they don't, but the point is that it doesn't really matter to them, right? It doesn't really matter to them, right? I'm not saying that everybody, but I'm saying there's a good portion, enough to where you can see it in the organization. You see some organizations where like, wow, this organization could really be something, but you got to get the right people in there, right? Got to get the right people in there. But it starts with the leadership in creating an environment in which people want to come to work. They want to give their all. They want to give the 100% of themselves because they understand that, hey, this is a good company. The company cares about me, right? And so I'm going to give it as much as I can. All right. There. Okay. Let's look at some contextual perspectives. Okay. So we got different perspectives here. We got the systems perspective, situational, contingency, and interactional. All right. So let's look at each one. Oh, not too fast. Okay. So system, of course, we know just a set of elements, right, that function as a whole, right? So you put a system together, you got inputs, and then the inputs are transformed or go to the transformation, and then give you an output, right? And that's normally a product or a service that's going to go, to the consumer or the end user via retail storefront or something like that, right? So some of the, value of the systems perspective is that it just helps to really push the thought of, that the importance of the organization's environment, right? That the system needs to be good, right? The system needs to be good, but the system isn't good. It really says something about the organization, right? And what kind of environment are we creating or do we have in our company, okay? Conceptualize the flow and interaction of various elements of organization. You can see, how things kind of go, how paperwork is shuffled, how people get through certain functions, right, of the organization. Excuse me, something in my eye. Yeah, so how people, how things go, right? How do the processes flow? What are the steps involved in getting from A to Z, right? And getting things approved or maybe purchased or that kind of thing, right? This is kind of where people be like, oh, there's a lot of red tape, right? Figuring that out, okay? All right, so here comes the system approach, more or less, right? Like we talked about. You got your inputs, right? You have your transformation that goes on in the middle, and you have your outputs. And all that feedback and environment. So you can tell it's just one loop, okay? It's kind of a loop, right? Environment goes into the inputs, feedback goes to the inputs, that goes to transformation, then out to the outputs. And then once you have the outputs, again, feedback goes into the environment gives us, their thoughts on it, right? Feedback gives us their thoughts on it. Boom, goes back to the inputs. Let's see if we can get better inputs or improve the inputs because when it goes to the transformation process, we'll get better outputs, right? And maybe we'll get less negative feedback and maybe we'll get less influence from the environment, right? So we need to figure this out, okay? And so that's the systems approach. Situational perspective is just that, right? When you think about situational perspective, you think about looking at the situation and the circumstances around that situation and not just applying a general approach to it based on the fact that it doesn't look the same, right? Or hey, this solution works for everything. No, it doesn't. You have to look at the situation and figure out, okay, how can I fix this based on what the circumstances are, right? The term that comes to mind is cookie cutter, okay? Cookie cutter is the opposite of situational perspective, okay? When we are talking about, you know, trying to figure out, what's going on, we have to look at the situation and take each situation on its own merits and not say, well, this looks like that, so I'm going to apply this particular approach to it because it worked for that one, right? I don't think so. Now, we may do that when we talk about a universal model, okay? That's different, right? We're talking about something that we know is a direct cause and effect, right, between variables, right? We can see it. There's a correlation, right? There's a relationship there. We just don't know the strength of the relationship. And then there's a cause and effect, right? There's a kind of a regression to it, right? I know that these variables are all inputs, and that if I tweak them in a certain way, I may get this outcome. Or if I have all these variables, I know what the outcome is going to be, right? And so you really, it's when we're looking at, a straight line, right? If we go back to algebra, the equation for a straight line is y equals mx plus b, right? So we look at the constant, then we look at the slope, and then we look at the variable, right? And then that's gonna all put together to give us a predictive model, right? And which is our outcome, okay? And so we look at the cause and effect of how that, how that works, right? Can we say A caused B to happen? If we can, then we have some ability to influence that situation, to influence the outcome. All right. All right. Well, let's go back here real quick. All right. So this is important here. Human behavior in organizational settings make universal conclusions virtually impossible. And the key here is the human behavior. You don't know how people are going to act. Okay. Unfortunately, we have no way in controlling people's behavior. People are going to do what they want to do, right? And so, because of this kind of dynamic and unpredictable component, the universal approach is never going to work, right? Because it's always changing, right? That's really what it boils down to. It's always changing. That's why situational is better in this situation when you're dealing with people, right? When you're dealing with people, it's always going to be situational because everybody's different. Your approach with one person is not going to be the same as your approach with another person. So you have to keep that in mind, right? Interactionist perspective, okay? Oops, excuse me. This is just trying to figure out, okay, how do people interact with each other, right? And depending on the situation, okay? Um, Trying to better understand, how people, take situations, how they deal with stress, how they deal with, success, how they deal with failure, right? That's all through interaction and through talking to others and taking, observations and notes and, being cognizant of really of what's going on. Okay. So if you're really trying to manage for effectiveness, right? Go back again. All right. As a manager, should be your goals, right? Enhance behaviors and attitudes, right? Promote citizenship, minimize dysfunctional behaviors, and drive strategic execution, right? As a manager, like I said, you want to make sure that you bring out the best in your folks, right? You want them to get along, right? You also want to keep track and keep an eye out for people that are doing things that don't necessarily fit in the workplace, okay? Sexual harassment, discrimination, right? Stereotyping, right? Those kind of things. Doesn't work well, not a team player, right? You want to kind of minimize those as best you can. Now, there's some dysfunction that you're going to see that you need to control, but you're never going to get rid of. Again, it's just a minimization of it, right? Just some mitigating factors that you're going to use to try to help to lessen the blow, right? You may have a great worker who's maybe super quiet or maybe not, and it's not necessarily dysfunction, or maybe is not very is a little, very frank or very direct or abrasive, right? And so you may want to minimize that, not necessarily dysfunctional behavior, but you want people that are able to talk to other people and not make them feel like they are less than, or feel like it's always a confrontation when they're talking to another person, right? Uh, and you want to always drive strategic execution, right? Let's get to the mission, right? Let's accomplish our goal. And that's always our mission, right? We want to make sure that we, get to where we need to get to. All right. So individual behaviors, of course, productivity and performance, right? We're looking at each person's productivity and how well they perform and trying to maximize that because we want people to be productive and to perform well, right? And so as a manager, I can do that through evaluation. I can do that through counseling. I could do that through training, right? There's a lot of different ways in which we can increase productivity and increase performance on an individual level, okay? So you want to make sure that again, like I said, development of your folks is critical here, right? If you are trying to develop all the people that work for you and get to be better, this is where it's done, right? Commitment, right? Trying to get, your folks committed, right? To, the company and to um, what's going on in your particular department, right? And trying to um, infuse or at least make the workforce understand that, hey, they are an essential or integral part of the company. And so that they are needed and they are valued, right? And so that's going to build commitment. A lot of that is building trust, okay? It's building trust. So you want to, get them committed and locked in so that even if there's something minor that is occurring, right, that they're not happy with, they'll still stick around with the company because they're committed to the company. They're committed to, being, the best employee they can be and getting, results and really doing well for the organization. And they plan on staying there. They plan on making it a career and the place where they want to retire at. Okay. Organization citizenship, again, it's the same thing. We're looking at, how do people behave and just making sure that we're respectful of each other. Okay, we're respectful of each other in the company, right? In our organization, and that contributes to, a good and favorable and positive environment. Okay, we don't want it to where people are nasty to each other, don't necessarily respect each other, speak down to each other, or speak, ill of each other, right? Talking behind each other's back, right? We want an organization where people are trusting. They actually hang out with each other after work, right? That's what we would like to do, right? We would like to get to where people are interacting with each other outside of the workplace, right? And then when they come to the workplace, they have a better relationship, which again increases productivity, helps with efficiency, and helps with the overall goal of the company. Okay. So of course, we got to talk about some dysfunctional behaviors, right? Um, Absenteeism, turnover, theft, sabotage, all things that just go with running an organization. Okay, you're gonna have all this. The point is that you want to minimize or keep that at a very small level, right? Absenteeism. If you see that, you need to inquire about that because you need to know what's going on, right? If you see an employee who's always absent or has a high rate of absence, then you need to ask them like, what's going on? Because they may have some personal stuff that they're not really telling you or divulging that is affecting their work, right? And it might just be a simple, tweak to their schedule or maybe just some help that the company offers as a resource that could change everything around, right? Turnover is a whole nother ball game, right? Turnover, again, could be voluntary or involuntary, right? So voluntary turnover, of course, is someone just decides they leave. Involuntary turnover is basically me or the company getting rid of someone, right? Via laid off or fired or, temporary, furlough, whatever the case may be, right? It's still turnover, okay? Theft, sabotage, again, not what you want, but it happens, right? And so you try to keep that at a minimum by making sure you have good inventory control, by making sure you secure things, by making sure you enforce good and honest habits in your employees, and then for them to understand like stealing something from the company is like stealing something from themselves, right? And so you don't want that sabotage either. You want your employees to sabotage things because depending on what line of work you're in, what industry you're in, sabotaging can lead to death, can lead people losing their lives, and we don't want that, right? Harassment, bullying, and violence not going to be condoned at all in the workplace, right? And so if you're an effective manager, you need to be able to manage these things, and this is where um, lawsuits really come into play. Okay, a majority of the lawsuits that have to do with sexual harassment, discrimination, hostile workplace, a lot of times they can be um, taken care of at the managerial level, right? At the manager's level. If the manager is active in making sure that everything is good. They can quell all that, right? But what happens is managers ignore, the complaints. They ignore the harassment. They ignore a lot of the bullying, and then it gets to the point where whoever is being affected by it has had enough, and now they elevated it to the next level, right? And once it's out of the manager's purview, it's over, right? Once it gets to HR, it's not going to be a good ending, right? It's going to go to EEOC or EEO, right? It's going to, may turn into a lawsuit, may have to do with mediation, arbitration. There's a lot of things that go into that, right? And so you have to be very proactive as a manager to make sure you're paying attention to what is going on in your workplace, right? And going on with your employees. If you know you have an aggressive employee who's always looking to bully folks, or kind of be more of a type A personality who's very overbearing, and maybe you have people that are a little bit more timid and laid back. You have to be able to control that, right? And because you don't want people again to feel like they are getting harassed at work. Politicized behavior, again, spreading rumors and civility, rudeness. So the same things we just talked about. Okay. And so final thing is strategic execution, right? The degree to which managers and employees understand and carry out the action need to achieve the strategic goals, okay? And understanding what it is that we need to do as a department or as managers, or as our unit, right, to contribute to the end goal of the company, okay? Really, if you think about, you know, managing the strategic execution, as the example says below, right? A lot of times it may seem, contradictory to do one thing and then expect a certain outcome, but that's kind of how it works. So, for example, like it says, given a high salary can enhance satisfaction and reduce turnover, but detracts from bottom line performance, right? Because, right, yes, it'll make the person happy. Yes, it'll reduce turnover because they're gonna stick around because they get well paid. But at the same time, if they get well paid, there's really no motivation for them to work harder to improve their bottom line because they are already making a lot of money, right? And they don't feel like maybe they're at a point where, oh, I'm at the highest level of getting paid of the of the salary of the pay bracket, right? Why do I need to work any harder? So maybe they'll start to slack off, or they know that, hey, it doesn't matter what I do, I'm getting, my salary, so I'm not gonna work as hard. I'm gonna work, a couple hours and I'll goof off, right? Right? Someone who's not getting paid as much and has some room to grow as far as salary goes, right? They may be striving for that promotion and keep working hard, and they work super hard because they are striving towards something, right? And so that will help with the bottom line because they're trying to be as productive or efficient as possible, right? All right, with that said, hopefully you got something out of the brief. If you have any questions, please feel free to email me, right? Any questions you have, make sure you get the learning engagement done by Wednesday, right? Your first initial post by Wednesday, and you're followed by Sunday. And I'm always available if you need me. All right. Have a good day.